It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Martin Hebart. Martin Hebart is a professor for computational cognitive neuroscience and quantitative psychiatry at University of Gießen and independent Max Planck research group leader, Max Planck Institute of Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences in Leipzig, Germany. His research group uses a combination of methods from cognitive psychology, computer science, and neuroscience to probe human visual perception and cognition. Please take it away.
Great, thank you very much. And it's really great to be part of that symposium. And I would really like to thank you for putting this together. So many of us at this workshop are really interested in understanding what cognitive AI benchmarking is really good for and how we can use it in our own research. And I think there's like two important reasons for using cognitive AI benchmarking. First, we want to learn from AI models to help us understand brain cognition. So we can use AI models as simple tools for prediction, and this can be useful for basic science, but also for application. And we can also use AI as like computational models for understanding like cognitive processes that we're actually trying to study. And then on the other hand, we can also be interested in the other direction, right? So how can cognitive science really inform AI? And knowledge about the brain and behavior can in principle be used for improving AI performance. And we can also use like behavior to understand AI and to make it safer. So in general, I think aligning human and AI representations may indeed be a good idea. And that's what like these cognitive AI benchmarks are really good for. Now, for cognitive AI benchmarking, however, there's like just one big challenge, which is known as Zipf's law, and which I like to call the curse of the tail. And the challenge is that there are just some things that you encounter more frequently than others in the real world. So you will just see a lot of, let's say, people or places or bodies or food, and you will barely ever encounter, let's say, like a back scratcher. And now let's assume we're able to sample the world in proportion to the importance in our experience, right? So just to clarify, like this is actually in itself an unresolved problem, how to sample this, but just for the sake of the argument, let's just assume that we are able to do so. So then our sampling of a stimuli should really follow this distribution and would then look a little bit like this. Now, the sampling really leads to two challenges. First, even if we're sampling extremely broadly, there will be a lot of diminishing returns at the tail of the distribution. So you have a ton of examples of, let's say, people, but you only have very few examples of, let's say, a back scratcher, right? So one possible way, of course, to overcome this challenge is just to sample like much more, just get much larger data sets. And eventually we may then be able to sample the world more broadly enough. And that's indeed really seems to be the current strategy used in AI research. However, the second challenge, and that's really something that's a bit more problematic specifically for cognitive AI benchmarking, is how we evaluate our models. And if we use the same distribution that we have for training our models, for also testing them, then of course, most of the performance will be driven by these examples at the head of our distribution and barely any at the tail. And the trouble is that in training, getting these rare examples really wrong won't matter at all. What this means is that even for enormously large data sets, your model may actually look like it's performing extremely well, but it may actually not work for that tail, okay? So this is the paradox, and people in machine learning have been trying to develop data sets specifically targeting this tail, but that's a real problem, not only for AI, but specifically for cognitive AI benchmarking. Okay, so high accuracies in predicting your benchmark may actually not mean high explanatory power in the wild. So let's assume that this is the real world object space that we're actually trying to understand, where each one of these dots is like reflecting one known object, right? And I'm focusing on objects because this is kind of the research that I'm focusing on, but you can expand this to other kinds of domains. Now, most current approaches really sample the space a bit like this. So what this means is that with databases that commonly use like MS-COCO or ImageNet, important parts of this representational space may indeed actually not be covered. And in addition, some classes might actually be overrepresented and may dominate the results. So one example is the strong presence of dogs in ImageNet, or let's say in COCO, there are just like a lot of pictures of giraffes, surfers, or dogs with frisbees. So humans might actually pick up on these biases, and that could even like then affect the downstream results even more. So I would say what we may really want is to cover the real world object space in a bit more of a systematic fashion. And I think that it would look a bit more like this. So by introducing a systematic sampling at this more like broad semantic level, we hope that we can overcome many of these challenges of this unguided sampling strategy. And that's where the idea of the things, object concept, and image database comes in. So we developed things to sample the space of objects very, very broadly. We have like roughly 2,000 objects representative of the American English language that really contain all of the objects that people name in their everyday life. We then manually created a set of more than 26,000 high quality images of these objects. And in contrast to like common machine learning data sets, this database is really optimized for cognitive neuroscience research, not only for vision, but also for memory and language. And in addition, we also have like extensive metadata, both at the category and at the image level. So a broad and systematically sampled image database is not only really useful for research in human brain and behavior, we can also use it for research in animal models, but also artificial intelligence. But what is really exciting for me is that having one data set available with data collected in different domains, we can now start like connecting the dots and really like bringing these different research domains together. So things, in a sense, could act as a Rosetta Stone for translating between these different research domains. And this allows us to better understand the alignment between AI, brains, and behavior. And this may then allow us to bridge the gap between like different levels of understanding in cognitive science, in neuroscience, and artificial intelligence research. And now this is when the idea of the Things Initiative was formed. And today there's a large-scale research looking at human fMRI or MEG or EEG, lots of behavioral recordings, intracranial recordings in humans or in macaque monkeys, covering like different parts of the brain, even like ECOG recordings and let's say memorability scores. So this initiative alone is really, really exciting to me. And there's obviously many more contributors that I couldn't fit on this plot. But what I find particularly special and really exciting is that a lot of these research are actually making their data publicly available for anyone to use. So overall, I believe that this growing initiative really helps the potential to become like an important resource for studying the representation of natural objects. And I would just like to highlight some developments from the Things Initiative. So in this study, we were interested in understanding what dimensions people use when they make judgments about the similarity of objects. And this would allow us to address a central question in cognitive science, which is like, well, what actually are the mental representations of objects? And for this, we used an odd one out similarity task. So what we did is we collected odd one out similarity judgments for all of our 1,854 objects. We then developed a computational model of the task that allows us to infer the dimensions underlying the similarity judgments about these objects. And then we collected a large-scale online data set of 1.46 million behavioral responses. Now, this approach yielded a 49-dimensional embedding of behaviorally relevant dimensions. And how well does the model work at predicting single trial behavior? So here's like chance level performance, and here's the noise ceiling. Noise ceiling meaning like the best performance any model could possibly achieve. And here you can see how well our model is achieving. And what you can see is that this actually is capturing 92% of the explainable variance of the data. So in other words, I think the model is actually doing a really good job. But the big question for us is like, well, are these dimensions actually interpretable? Do they reveal really like core dimensions underlying our mental representations of objects? And here you see some example of dimensions here. These are not cherry-picked, they're just like assembled for diversity. And what you can see is that they are reflecting both like conceptual dimensions like animals or something being valuable, but also more like perceptual dimensions like something being round, something being colorful, or something like having more like a fine-grained pattern. Now, what this means is that we can now actually characterize these objects as mental representation as like a combination of different behaviorally relevant dimensions. So for example, a peacock could be characterized as being animal related, plant related or green, colorful or valuable and special and having a repetitive pattern, whereas like a rocket would be characterized as being transportation related, sky flying related, shiny transparent, fire related, artificial and hard. Now, more recently, we've actually created like 3 large-scale things data sets that we've made publicly available and that are using like fMRI, MEG, and behavioral similarity judgments. And for the fMRI and the MEG, we actually collected data across 12 to 14 scanning sessions. And to stabilize head movement, we used custom head cases tailored to each individual subject that will bring them back to exactly the same position across different sessions. And now for behavior, we increased our data set of similarity judgments to 4.7 million data points. Now, recently, in a collaboration with Max Kramer and Wilma Bainbridge from University of Chicago, we additionally collected a massive behavior data set collecting so-called memorability scores for all of the things images. So when it comes to remembering images, it actually turns out that there are like image-specific effects, so that some images are just inherently easier to remember than others. So in other words, like we would kind of like remember a similar image and forget similar images, like being one person or another person. And now what you can see here are like examples for the most memorable category, which in our case was the candy bar, and the least memorable category, which is like windshield. Now, what has remained unclear is what it actually is that makes images memorable. And with this data set, what we found is that object semantics, which is pictured here, meaning the meaning of an image, is actually playing a huge role for what is memorable or what is not memorable. And that's a bit of an unexpected finding, because previously most people thought that it's actually mostly the image itself, so the visual variance, that's mattering most. But like actually doing this broad semantic sampling and things, we were able to show that no, semantics is actually really a dominating factor here. Even more recently, in collaboration with Kushin Mukherjee, Holly Wei, and Judy Fan and Wilma Bainbridge, we collected things drawings, for which we've now collected more than 30,000 sketches from all 1,854 objects. And we also have recognizability scores for all of these images, and that will allow us to study what image features are most relevant for recognizing semantically diverse objects. So I hope I convinced you that Things is a resource that may actually turn out to be really beneficial for research aiming to understand visual processing, but also semantic processing in cognitive science and in neuroscience, and that there's a lot of potential for using these data sets for semantically broad and cognitive AI benchmarking. So if you're interested in this resource, just check out our website. If you'd like to learn more about this, there's lots of different data sets already available. But now there's obviously an elephant in the room that I didn't necessarily talk about, and I want to address it right now. So the question is it actually beneficial at all to go broad in terms of semantics, right? Because that's a strategy that we used in Things. Is this a good strategy? Is there actually a benefit from using Things over other existing cognitive AI benchmarking strategies? Well, so just beyond the purely theoretical arguments I was making for why I think a broader semantic sampling actually may be a really good strategy, AI researchers have actually recently started to use Things with some pretty exciting developments and results. And I just want to show you just two examples here. There's a recent preprint from Philip Isola's group. And what they did is they developed a new metric for visual similarity that they call DreamSim. And this metric is meant to evaluate the similarity of individual images with other images of the same class. And they then develop a data set that allows evaluating this method relative to humans. Now, when the authors evaluate this metric on a previous image-based similarity data set, what they show is that the metric can really improve prediction of human similarity judgments as compared to just a standard model, okay? However, now when they use the Things behavior data set, the metric is actually worse. So what this means is that that there is a limitation of really focusing purely on visual similarity alone for predicting human similarity judgments, and that it really actually makes sense to also include broad semantics into the similarity metric, which would then help to further improve the performance. Another recent preprint asked whether we can actually improve state-of-the-art AI models using the Things similarity data set. So just as some background, almost all previous work has shown that when you align models to humans, so when you make them specifically more human-like on purpose, the neural network performance, what it's actually been trained on, goes down. Okay, so this is a general problem with the alignment between humans and AI. What the authors did here is actually some really nice trick. What they did is they looked at the global similarity structure for a larger set of concepts. And what they found was that the local similarity structure was actually really similar between DNNs and humans, but the global similarity structure, so where in a more global representational space, these different clusters ended up. So let's say a food cluster would end up somewhere different in humans as compared to deep neural networks. And what the authors then did is actually to keep the local similarity structure intact, but aligned only the global similarity structure. And what this transformation then did is the following. So what you see here is the degree of human alignment, and what you see is on the y-axis is the performance on downstream tasks. And what you can clearly see is that the increased human alignment actually does not lead to worse performance. If any, it actually slightly improves performance for few-shot learning. And for an anomaly detection task, it actually strongly improves the performance throughout. So what this demonstrates is really the power of using a semantically broad data set like things for improving neural network performance. So to summarize, I hope that I convinced you that cognitive AI benchmarking really suffers from what I call the curse of the tail, and that it's very challenging to really come up with like a fair comparison metric. The Things Initiative offers a semantically broad collection of behavioral and neural data sets that may improve our knowledge in the domains of vision, semantics, memory, and language. And finally, I hope that I was able to highlight that Things offers a really useful resource for cognitive AI benchmarking. Things is only just starting to be used. So I'm really very much looking forward to the future of this resource. And with that, I'd just like to thank my team and my collaborators and my funding sources. I'm very much looking forward to our discussion.